because obviously being signed to Zeppelin's label, being managed by Peter Grant, everybody thought it was going to be a massive, massive band.
Hey, is this Steve?
Can you hear me?
There we go. Perfect. I can hear you. So how's it going?
Very well, my man. Yeah, great. I'm in the middle of a tour with FM at the moment. So I've just got back from Belgium the night before last, and I'm back out for 4 British shows tomorrow. Then I'm finished for the year. So tired and ready for a rest, basically, you know?
Oh, I bet. Where have you guys been touring?
We just done a European tour. So we started in Belgium, France, Germany, 6 shows in Spain, 2 in Portugal, Greece, and then back here, and then 4 more, and then we're done for the year, you know?
Oh, that's incredible.
It's been a busy year. We started in South America and Brazil in February, and we haven't really stopped this year. It's been fairly manic, you know?
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so when I do these, I like to start at the beginning of you as a musician and then work our way up to the new record.
Okay.
So going back to the beginning, where did you grow up and how did you get started in music?
I grew up in a place in England called Norfolk, a county called Norfolk, which is like a farming community. All of the rest of my family, apart from my brother, were farmers, you know? And we formed a local band there that then got signed when I got signed to Chrysalis Records when I was 17.
You were 17 at the time. Wow.
17. So I got my first major deal at 17, got taken to London, made an album, stayed in London. Then it went on from there. I got signed to Swan Song Records, Led Zeppelin's label, made an album with Simon Kirk from Bad Company and Free called Wildlife, me and my brother. Toured that with Michael Schenker and various other people. It's a long career. That will take the whole half an hour off.
No kidding. Well, I want to talk a little bit about Wildlife, mostly because I own the second record.
Oh, yeah.
How did the band initially form, and how did you guys come to the attention of Chrysalis?
Well, Chrysalis were... I basically played in a venue in Kings Lynn, which is a small town. And it was kind of like a movie. There was a guy that used to be very famous in England that he managed Leo Sayer. He managed Blondie for a while. There's a guy called Adam Faith.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard the name. Yeah.
Yeah. He was a very famous actor, went into management and managed some major, major people over here, you know, pop artists. He'd heard a demo of, Wildlife, the first draft of Wildlife, which wasn't the ones that made the album in the end, but, he loved the stuff and he drove to Kings Lynn because he'd seen that we were doing a show there. We were just a local band at the time, Brandon. He turned up in a Rolls Royce Corniche with 2 of his team, saw me and Chris and said, I want you to come to London. I want you to record that song Sunlight that you have and 2 more of your songs. So we went to Ear Studios, London in Oxford Street, which is George Martin's studio, who's the Beatles producer,
of course.
And we recorded 3 songs. He played them to Chrysalis and they offered us a deal. I was 17 at the time, so I thought, this is it, I'm going to be a star. How wrong can you be?
I think you've done pretty good in your career, all things considered.
Yeah, but that's how it started. And then Wildlife dispersed, that particular lineup, and we came to the attention of, me and Chris had done a much more rocky demo. And there's a very famous A&R man, used to be with Geffen Records, called John Kolodner.
Oh, of course. I know.
He signed AC/DC. He signed everybody.
I think it has something to do with Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So John, I got to know John, very strange guy, came over, met me and my brother and said, look, I know that Bad Company have taken a break. They've come off tour in America. There are no plans to make a new album at the moment. Simon, I played Simon Kirk some of your songs, and he thinks it could be the next Bad Company. He loves the material. So, to cut a long story short, Brandon, we went down to London. I met Peter Grant, who managed Led Zeppelin, who also talked to me about forming this band. So, me, Simon, and Chris then auditioned for bass players. So, Philip Susan, who later went on to play with Ozzy, came along for the audition. We had some great people. We had Bob Daisley from Ozzy's band. We had really great people because obviously being signed to Zeppelin's label, being managed by Peter Grant, everybody thought it was going to be a massive, massive band because all of the bands that they were connected with, especially in America at that time, Led Zeppelin, Bad Company, everybody that they had were like the biggest rock bands in the world at that time, So there were great high hopes for Wildlife. So we made the album, the one you have, produced by Mick Rouse, the Bad Company guitar player. And still a young man, I was working with my idols because I was a massive Free Bad Company fan, obviously because of Paul Rodgers. So I got to meet Paul. I got to work with some of my idols at a very young age, basically, So it's been pretty cool. My career's sort of been a fairly, I've been very lucky,
Of course. Just one more question about Wildlife. So after the second record, you guys did a 4-song demo that's famous for having Shot in the Dark on it.
Yeah.
Tell me about doing that demo. And obviously there's some contention about who wrote the song. And obviously it's a bit different than how Ozzy's turned out. But tell me about that demo and that track.
Well, I mean, we were going to make a second album with Simon. So we started to record some songs. We wrote Shot in the Dark in Norfolk at my mother's house. Phil was over with me and Chris. We sat in the lounge. I remember it quite vividly. We wrote the song. Chris came up with a do-do-do, the riff, and do-do-do-do, all the stuff that's on there. I wrote the melodies. Phil, I think, came up with the title. I wrote all of the melodies to it. Chris wrote the lyric with me and Phil. Ozzy obviously rewrote the lyric to suit his style a bit better, but the melodies are identical, as is the music. But, Sharon was great with me, Ozzy's wife. She came and said, look, we've heard about the problem with this song. We've heard your demo. Quite obviously, Phil shouldn't have brought the song to us and said it was his song because it isn't. So, Phil was there. He was there in underwriting, but, I think he went in there with a sort of proviso that it was 100% his song, so they could do what they wanted with it, But, Randolph, my career was going great at the time. We'd formed FM. We'd been signed to CBS. And you get to that thing with, I was more interested in becoming the next Bon Jovi than fighting for a song I'd written 8-9 years before,
Sure.
So, rather than, I didn't need to grasp onto every little penny and I didn't need to do that. So I just let it go, and I don't regret it. It's unfortunate. I probably wouldn't have done it, but it's one of those things. And for me, it's all about what you do next, not what you did in the past,
For sure. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I interviewed Jimmy Bell a couple weeks ago from House of Lords and Autograph.
Yeah.
And he had the exact same story with the other members of Black Sabbath. He wrote a song that is on the Dehumanizer record. He didn't get credit for it either.
Right.
So, and he's of the same mind. He's like, well, it'd be nice to get credit and extra money wouldn't hurt. But he's like, at the end of the day, we all know the truth of where it came from, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I've not even seen Phil since. And we have Times FM have been on festival bills we're last in line have been on, who plays with now, the Dio band,
Yeah.
But we've never really crossed paths, If we did, it would be a discussion, but, we were young. He was obviously trying to make his mark on Ozzy's band. He hadn't really got any more songs at that time, I don't think so. And it certainly worked because it was the most successful single that Ozzy ever had. So, but it's what it is, Brandon. I mean, since that way back in those days, I kind of went on. I work with Simon Kirk again now in a band called Lone Rider. We make albums together. Again, we're on the third Lone Rider.
I've heard do you guys have a couple, right? Lone Rider. I've heard one of them.
Yeah, we've done two. We've just finished the third one, which will be out, which is the best one by far, and it's great. I still love playing with Simon. The band's great, and it's what it was meant to be. It is like a new version of Bad Company and Free. That's what it's meant to be. Stripped back 70s style rock, So
yeah, that's perfectly how I would describe it. So.
Yeah. So as I say, I'm back. I've not really ever thought about Shot in the Dark in the past 30 plus years. So people are always talking to me about it, but I don't talk to other people about it,
That's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, for me, I've known both versions a long time, so it's it's great to sort of hear your side of that, and definitely one of my favorite Ozzy tunes too.
Oh, that's great. So
tell me this though. So like you said, you guys had formed FM by that point in the mid '80s, and you're joined by Samson's rhythm section with Pete and Merv.
Yeah.
Tell me about doing the Indiscreet record. You guys did it at the famous Ibiza Sound Studios, which I think was renamed by that point.
Some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of I'd played with Pete on the original Wildlife album. He was the drummer in Wildlife for many years when we were playing around the London clubs and pubs trying to establish a following. They'd been with Samson, and Merv and Pete had basically wanted to get out of that style of music and wanted to form a more melodic kind of band. And Pete just said, well, I know who we should get to sing in the band. They approached me and Chris. We were signed to Brian Lane, who managed Yes and Asia at the time. We had a meeting in a pub in London and decided that we'd give it a go. We said, let's not waste a load of time. We were all on retainers. We didn't really need to do it. But we said, let's do 4 songs. We have 2 songs. We had Face to Face. No, we had 3. We had Let Love Be the Leader, Face to Face, and American Girls, me and Chris. Merv and Pete had the original version of That Girl, which is the version that Iron Maiden later recorded. But me and Chris thought the chorus was weak, so we wrote the chorus to That Girl, the new chorus. Went in, did a 4-track demo, and once again, Brandon did a showcase in a studio in London and got offered 3 deals. So CBS were the best option for us, and that's how it all came about. We were kind of like, we did lots more demos and writing, and they just said, where do you want to record? And we said, how about Spain? Like you do, So we went off to Spain for 6 weeks, came back, and the only thing we kept was the bass and drums. We then recorded the album. It came out. It was very successful over in the UK. And with that album, fortunately, we got to tour with Tina Turner. We did the Private Dancer tour because Bryan Adams wrecked us up.
Really? I didn't know you guys. I knew you guys toured with Bon Jovi on Slippery.
Yeah, Bryan Adams was on tour with her in Germany, and Reckless went mad. It went to number 1 everywhere. So he left the tour to go and do a headline tour. And the management, Barry Dickens, who knew FM, played our album to Tina's management, and they said, we love this. Are they available to do the tour? So that was the start of our relationship with ITB, who then we signed to a different agency in England. But then Barry and Rob McSween, who were Bon Jovi's agents, said, look, Bon Jovi have heard the Indiscreet album. They're coming over to do their first headline tour over here. Would you support them? And we're like, well, it'd be fantastic. We've heard the Slippery When Wet record. But at that time, it hadn't really become the force it was going to become, But it did. When we were on the tour, all of a sudden it went to number 1 all over the world. So we were with the Bon Jovi guys when they became the biggest rock band in the world. It was a great feeling for them and to be there when it happened. Do you know what I mean?
Of course.
All of the gigs were in theatres, and they were like the same amount of people outside of the theatres as there were inside trying to get in, So it was an amazing tour for us, probably a massive memory for me. Of all the tours we've done, which are a lot, we've toured with pretty much all of my idol bands, from your Journeys, your Foreigner, everybody, So, but the Bon Jovi tour, because it was the start of them becoming the biggest rock band in the world, was great to be around at that time, and it launched FM to a totally different level, obviously. All of a sudden we went back and headlined all of those big theatres. So it was a fantastic launch pad for the band.
For sure. We'll touch on some of the other stuff you've done as well, and obviously we got to talk about the new Kings of Mercia record. But I got to ask you, you guys worked with one of my favorite producers, Neil Kernon, for the next record, Shy, Queensryche, Doc, and all the stuff he's done. Tell me about working with him on the Tough It Out album.
Well, Neil's great because he's an English guy, but all of the big records he's done, like he did H2O, Private Eyes for Hall & Oates, he's done some huge records, and Neil came over, and he's a great guy. He's a great personality. He's very upbeat, and he's a perfectionist. When it comes to the recording process, he's like an old school producer, Brandon. Producers these days are more into just the sound and the technology. Back in those days...
Yeah, they're basically glorified engineers.
That's it. That's correct. Those days, it was all about getting performances, and it was all about holding the recording process together, maximizing the time you got on the studio. And Neil was an absolute expert at doing that, and we came out with probably, in my opinion, still, although it's a long, long time ago, 1989, it's an album that's hard to rival as one of your records that you released. It was a fantastic record. It was the one that launched the band to the next level everywhere. And I had a great time recording it. We became great friends. I've met up with Neil in New York since. And I'd like to, if I go to New York, I'd look him up again. He's a great guy and a very talented man. So it just worked great. It worked great,
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk quickly. You recorded on Alan Parsons' song,
I did.
Free Fall. Tell me about recording that with him.
Fantastic. It was just, to me, Brandon, it was just the guy that managed Alan Parsons used to manage me many, many years ago. And as a solo artist, a guy called Pete Smith. And I had no idea he managed Alan Parsons. And he just phoned me up one day. He got in touch with me through various people, connections, and said, I want you to do a session. Said, would you come? He said, I've been listening to your voice is better than it ever was. Will you come and do the session? I'm like, yeah. I said, when do you want me to do it, Pete? And so anyway, to cut a long story short, I went to a studio in London, and it was Alan Parsons' own studio. And it was the most amazing studio ever, Brandon. It was quad sound, the speaker systems in there, because he's an absolute perfectionist, Alan Parsons,
Oh, yeah. I went to a talk of his at NAMM, and he geeked out for 20 minutes about gear.
Genius,
it was great.
Genius, absolute genius. And he played me the track. It was great, and it was very Genesis-like. I loved the feel of it. Did the vocal, and he was like, this is incredible. Pete came in and said, Alan wants you to do, because he builds his own studio equipment as well, outboard gear. And he just designed a new compressor. And he said, your voice is so dynamic, Steve. Would you do a second session for me so that I can test my new compressor and do a short film explaining how it works? So I got to do more than just the song, Brandon. I went in and did this demonstration with his new compressor on my voice, singing soft and loud, and how it could control a voice that had dynamics in it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so it was a great day. I loved it. I really loved doing it. And, everything I do, I love doing. I think, and I still do. Nothing's changed there. I still love all the challenges of doing lots of different things. And when you go to a studio and you have no idea who you're going to be recording with, I do a lot of sessions and stuff. And I still love that challenge of not knowing what I'm going to do until I get there. It's great.
Of course. All right, one other thing. So you did, in the early 2000s, you formed Shadowman.
Yeah.
Tell me about that record. That seemed to be sort of a project in between FM stints, a little bit more bluesy, but still kind of in that, melodic rock vein. Tell me about that record, that band, but also
Yeah, I did. I did 5 or 6 records with Shadowman. What it was, I did a session for a record company called Escape Music in England, doing, funnily enough, a Boston song. They wanted me to sing a Boston song. They contacted me and said, I went to a studio in Liverpool, and there was a guy there that had done all the backing tracks called Steve Morris, fantastic guitar player. I got chatting to Steve. We got talking. I did the track. They loved the track. And Steve said, look, Steve, would you be interested in working with me on some original songs? And I just said, well, I'm quite busy at the moment, Steve, but yeah, I'd love to, So the record company put me and Steve together, and we wrote songs for the first Shadowman record. And I'm great friends with a band from England called Thunder.
Oh, yeah. No Thunder.
I've known Harry and Chris Childs for a long, long time. They're old friends. And I just thought, you know what, if we're going to do an album for that kind of music, you're hard pushed to find a better rhythm section.
Sure.
So I asked Harry and Chris. They came along and met Steve. The band gelled fantastically well in the studio, and that was the start of Shadowman. We went on to do, I think, 4 or 5 more records after that, And I'm still in touch with Harry and Chris. They're really good friends. Chris plays with Lone Rider because he has that Andy Fraser kind of fantastic bass brain that he can come up with stuff that goes great with Simon's drumming. It's like the free rhythm section with Lone Rider. So Chris plays with Lone Rider now because Shadowman, we stopped Shadowman because basically, Brandon, I've done 6 solo albums as well. So it was a bit like, I thought too many different things. So we drew a line under Shadowman. And then later on, I got asked, Simon was reintroduced to me, and I had my plan I've always wanted to make a freestyle record, with not too many overdubs, played in the studio, stripped back, rawer sounding record. like those records were. And that's how Lone Rider was born, you know?
It's incredible. Okay, we're quickly running up on time, so let's talk the new Kings of Mercia record, which, you know, is on paper a very interesting supergroup featuring yourself and Jim Matheos and Joey Vera from Fate's Warning and Simon Phillips from Judas Priest, Toto, and a million other things he's done.
Yeah.
How did that band come together?
Well, that was a strange one, Brandon. I mean, it was lockdown, and I got a message from a very famous journalist in the UK called Dave Ling. He wrote for Kerrang. He now writes for classic rock. He writes books, and he's got his own site, and he's very well known.
Yeah, his name sounds very familiar.
Yeah, he does. He's written for all the big mags, and basically, Dave and me are very old friends. And he knew Jim Matheos, and basically, he got an email from Jim. Jim had this idea. He wanted to merge two styles: the kind of detuned guitars, heavy kind of Fate's Warning, proggy-ish, heavier side of that band, with a really melodic blues rock singer. And I was top of his list of those singers, but he didn't know how to contact me. I'd never met him. And so he contacted Dave and said, "Do you know Steve Overland?" And Dave said, "I've known Steve Overland for over 40 years. So Dave put me in touch with Jim. We emailed each other. And I just said to Jim, "Look, Jim, I don't understand what you want to do and what the sound is you're trying to create, but send me a backing track of your idea. I'll write some words and some music and some lyrics and a title. If it works, great. If it doesn't, it's one song. We've lost nothing. We haven't wasted too much time." So Jim sent me the backing track to the song that became Humankind from the first record. I wrote that song to the backing track, sent it back to Jim. He freaked out and went, "You've read my mind. This is exactly what I want." He played it to Tracy, Joey Vera's wife, who's the head of Metal Blade Records America. They said, "This is amazing." And we got a 3-album deal on the strength of one song.
That's incredible.
So that was the birth of Kings of Mercia. We made the first record. Me and Jim demoed all of the songs. And then Jim said, "Right, we're going to need a band." So he said, "What about if I ask Joey?" I said, "Well, that'd be amazing if Joey's up for doing it." And then he said, "And I've approached Simon Phillips." And I'm like, "What?" He said, "I've approached Simon Phillips." So Jim got the rhythm section together in America and started to send me tracks through with Simon and Joey playing on them with the master guitars and vocals on. And I was a bit like, wow, this is something else, you know? And that's how the band was born. And, you know, me and Jim love doing it. It's something fresh. It's a different challenge for me, Brandon, because I changed the way I sing a little bit to what I do with all the other things I do. It's less bluesy. It's more attitude, I guess, on those records.
It's funny because when I first heard the band in 2022 and the first album came out, I didn't realize you were singing on it. For exactly a reason. I was looking up the band members later. I'm like, oh, okay, Steve Overland's on it. That's great.
Yeah, well, that's great. I'm glad you said that because I consciously didn't want it to be like the way I sing FM songs and Lone Rider songs and all the other things that I do. I wanted to make it more angsty. I wanted the subject matter to be more, I guess, darker, you know. So it was a conscious decision of mine. So I'm great that I've done it that well that you didn't even know it was me. That's perfect. You know? Yeah, so I love doing these records because the reason I've been able to probably survive as long as I have in this business is because any new challenge I take on board. I mean, I've written country albums. I just love fresh things to do, you know?
Yeah.
And Jim is a genius. He's amazing to work with. The nicest, most unassuming guy. Absolutely brilliant at what he does. And everything he sends me, he never sends me anything where I go, I'm not sure about that. Everything he sends is of such a high standard that nothing really gets discarded. It's all fantastic. So it inspires me to write it. And I think the band have evolved with Battle Scars, the second album. There are some very much darker tracks on there. And we're finding where Kings of Mercia should be now, you know?
Yeah, I was going to say, I liked the first record, really good, but the second one, I feel like you guys have really found your legs.
Oh, that's great to hear. I mean, I agree. I think we've now realized what Kings of Mercia should be. There are no rules. I mean, like you got Jim, like when I got the song Aftermath, I thought, crikey, this is the darkest song I've ever written. So I had to find a subject matter that was equally dark. So the end of the world, it's really dark. So, and that's what I like about it. You never know what Jim's going to send you. Then you got Battle Scars, which is the song, which is a very melancholy kind of song. It's not a lot. The most instant thing you would do with that song is write a love song. Well, I didn't want to do that. And I saw a documentary on post-traumatic stress disorder. It was a documentary about these guys that had come back from the war that couldn't settle back into normal life, you know?
Yeah.
And it was sad. It was a very sad thing to watch because they so wanted to be where they were before they went away and experienced what they'd experienced. So I thought that's a very sad subject, but it would go great with that piece of music. So that inspired me. And that's what I tend to do with Kings of Mercia. I'll wait until I find something that I think goes with what Jim sends me. And as I say, that's the great thing about it. It's a great challenge for me. And I just love it. And when I got the mixes back with Simon and Joey on again, it blows you away. It's such an anthemic band. So I love doing it, Brandon. I really love it.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun putting it on the player the last couple of weeks and getting acquainted. And I had it on just before I called you, and it ended with Angels and Demons. And
yeah,
God, I love that song too. I mean, it's very melodic, but also it hits you in the chest, you know, very heavy tune.
Yeah. Yeah. Once again, you know, it's about the subject matter. We all have angels and demons, don't we? We do, from the past or whatever. We try not to dwell on them, but the good and bad things always come our way. But, you know, it's like that's what the song's about. And that's why I love doing it. I have to think about different things to write the songs about. With FM, I can get away with writing love songs and about girls and cars all I want to, you know, but with Kings of Mercia, that's not what the band's about. You know, so it's a fresh challenge for me.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's really a perfect marriage of Fate's Warning and FM. It's like if you kind of strip out the progginess of Fate's Warning and you kind of heavy up FM, it meets beautifully in the middle.
Yeah,
between the two.
That's fantastic. That is absolutely what it should be. So, you know, you've hit the nail on the head, so to speak. There, definitely.
So you've got the new Kings of Mercia. FM just had a record coming out. I think you said you had a new solo record coming out, or what was it?
No, I've just done my first show as Overland. I got a great band together. It was massively successful, a festival in the UK. So I'm going to do some more solo shows next year, more Overland shows. But FM are back in the studio. I've got these 4 shows. Next year's tour schedule is already hugely booked up, as it always is with FM. So I'm going back to South America and back to Spain and all the places we go to every year. So we need to get a record done to promote on all the. See, our management now and our promoters put the tours in to make us work, so that we do the records. You know,
yeah.
Because you know you quite easily can put one out every 2 years, but they want an album a year. So we have the songs where we did some recording before the European tour. So I'm back in the studio next week for 3 days doing that. So it's just everything really. Brandon, you know, it's very, very busy time, which is fantastic. So I like it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, with all the stuff you've done, it's pretty clear you like to keep busy musically.
Yeah, so. Definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. I really enjoyed the chat. Been loving the new Kings of Mercia record. And we didn't really talk about it, but the latest FM too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic, Brandon. So hopefully we'll speak about the next thing. You know, it's been great talking to you. Great questions.
Oh,
you know,
thank you so much. Yeah, I'll look to see if I can get you maybe for the next FM record.
Very definitely. No problem at all. So we've covered 45 years and half an hour. That's not bad, eh? You know. All right, my man. Nice to talk to you.
All right. Thanks again, Steve. Take care and best of luck with the new record.
See you later. Bye-bye. Bye.